Jim, when we look back at 2020, sometimes it seems like there's only really one story this year: the pandemic and its effect on the economy, on businesses, on all of us. It's been pretty pretty impactful here in St. Louis. We, in the month of April, we lost, like 150,000 jobs all of a sudden, which is just a huge, unprecedented impact. We've gained back more than half of those jobs, but we're still down, like something like 68,000 jobs. Which is a really deep recession.
The only good thing you could say about this year is it could have been worse. I mean, we went up to 11% unemployment in the May area. Now we're down to 4%, which would somewhere in the 4% range. It would normally be considered a fairly good unemployment rate, except that we've lost huge amounts of the workforce. Something like 50,000 people have dropped out of the workforce.
That's right.
Either taking early retirement or deciding they had to stay home and take care of the kids. We add that bit back in, the job picture looks bad.
Well, yeah, we usually call those discouraged workers, but in this case, it's not all because they're discouraged about job prospects. I mean, some of them are parents who dropped out of the workforce because their kids were schooling at home, virtual schooling, and they needed to be there to take care of them. Some of them quit just because they're concerned about their health. They didn't want to be exposed to possible infection. So there, all kinds of reasons, but it's going to take those jobs a long time to come back, I think.
Well, in the last recession, it took like 7 years.
Yeah,
but I'm more optimistic this time because we have a vaccine out in the future. We can see an end to this. I think it'll be quicker this time.
Quicker, but I'd still say it's going to be at least a couple of years. Probably we're talking like 2023, maybe 2024 before we get back to those employment levels that we saw before the pandemic.
That's possible. If there were other, the pandemic was a major disaster, but there are also some other negative things, companies like Mallinckrodt going bankrupt, Peabody teetering on the edge,
Merritt's, which was affected by the pandemic, but they, our colleagues reporting has showed they were having some, some issues before that. There's certainly some longer term trends affecting some of those, and the company that owns 4 major St. Louis shopping malls filed bankruptcy this year. That was precipitated by the pandemic, but those, shopping malls in general were hurting for a long time. The pandemic just sort of accelerated the decline.
I drove past the Galleria last night. Here we are just before Christmas, and normally the parking lot would be packed, plenty of empty spaces. Yeah, it has accelerated the decline of the brick and mortar retail industry, and it's helped get us all used to buying stuff online. If there is any silver lining in that, it's that there are a lot more jobs for delivery drivers. And if you got laid off,
that's true. And Amazon is hiring. The places where there have been jobs have been grocery stores. Amazon, delivery, that whole industry, and but the bright spots are few and far between. But one of them is the housing market. Housing construction has been, pretty much on the same pace it was before the pandemic, and home prices in the St. Louis area, they're up like 8% in the past year. That's the most I can remember. It's pretty much a record pace.
And that's a function of the oddly unequal aspect of this recession. People like you and me kept our income. My investments have risen. I'm wealthier now than I was at the beginning of this recession. But the people who got hurt tended to be the people on the bottom of the wage scale. The restaurant workers and the store clerks.
That's right. Yeah. Well, not quite half of the jobs that have disappeared since the since the pandemic have been in leisure and hospitality, basically hotels, restaurants, entertainment venues, the ballparks. These were not, for the most part, high-paying jobs. They're working class folks in the service industries that in the past have been fairly recession resistant, but this time they got the brunt of it just because of the nature of this pandemic.
There was a 21% decline in the number of leisure and hospitality jobs out there.
Yeah.
And that worries me about the future, because these are the people, if you and I lost our jobs, we have savings, we could, we could make it through a dry period, but these are the paycheck to paycheck people. And I wonder, eventually the eviction moratorium stop, eventually the forbearance on mortgages stop, and will these people be able?
That people are having trouble paying their utilities. We saw huge lines for whenever there was a food distribution event by the charities in St. Louis, or churches, that huge lines. That was repeated theme this year. There's a lot of hurt out there, and it's not going to heal quickly.
I'm hoping that it will heal quickly. I'm hoping that by the middle of next year, enough of us will have been vaccinated that we'll feel safer going, taking trips and going to hotels and going out to eat at restaurants, and demand from we people who have survived fairly well through this pandemic will lift the bottom up. But I'm not confident of that. That's just a hope.
I think there is some pent-up demand for restaurant dining, for travel, for going back to baseball games and concerts and the like. But it's for the one thing, it'll probably be the middle of the year before we get enough people vaccinated to for people to feel comfortable doing those things. And even then, it'll be a gradual comeback. I would say the first half of 2021 will feel a lot like the second half of 2020. We'll probably still have some spikes in the coronavirus numbers. We'll have we're worrying right now about a possible new strain that's more infectious. But if the vaccine works as advertised, and if we get the logistics figured out to get everybody vaccinated, the second half of the year should look better.
You think so? If they're a less awful spot of this thing is that we had this great spike in November and December, and it seems to have leveled off and seems to be declining. It seems that perhaps, the restrictions placed in the county especially are working to get the infection rate down. It's still too darn high, and you still have
and we just got a relief measure through Congress, which will help some. It will, I think it will keep us from having a double dip recession. And possibly push us a little bit faster on the road to recovery.
Sure, the extra $300 that they'll get for 11 weeks on top of the unemployment is just a lifesaver.
Yeah.
I mean, considering that the average unemployment check in Missouri anyway is about $300 or less. That extra $300 lets you pay the rent. And perhaps gets you a little bit part of the way toward the recovery.